Have you ever felt like your music class was, well, a little stuck in a rut? Just the same old, same old? Today, we're meeting a band director who completely flipped the script after being inspired by a surprising source: Japanese music education. Welcome to Pass the Baton, empowering students in music education. Here, we amplify the voices of music teachers around the world who are passing the baton and creating environments where the music students are empowered. Together, we can help students transform from passive consumers to vibrant creatives. Welcome to Pass the Baton podcast. I'm Kathryn Finch.
And I'm Theresa Hoover. We are glad to be with you today. Okay, Kathryn, another fun guest. What did you think?
Yeah, it was really nice to meet Berry. It was kind of really cool to see him learn something in his master's program and then just kind of go down a rabbit hole and then come on back on the other end and like apply it in his own experience in his own classroom.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that I really appreciated was, Barry was learning about these Japanese programs and he took that, but he adapted it to meet the needs of his students,
Yeah.
right? He was recognizing who his students were, their strengths, their passions, all of that. And he put that together with what he had learned. So I think that's a really valuable lesson to think about who we have in front of us and how we're
Mm-hmm.
going to take these things and apply them.
Yeah, that student-centered approach is so gratifying too for the teacher to watch kids, own their own learning and just blossom in front of you.
Yeah. Yeah. It was really, really fun to learn about. All right. Well, before we get to the interview, do you feel like you're drowning in lesson plans and wish that you had a musical support system in your corner? Well, grab your favorite mug because we have just the thing for you, and that's the Pass the Baton Coffee Club.
For less than the cost of that fancy latte, you'll unlock a treasure trove of free resources. Get invited to our monthly planning parties, thank virtual coffee break with amazing lesson ideas, and score sweet discounts on music education goodies in our store.
Or if you just want to lend a hand to the Pass the Baton mission of empowering music teachers and music students, you can become a supporter, only $2 a month.
Think of it as a way to fuel your passion, elevate your teaching, and connect with a vibrant community of music educators.
So be sure to check out the link. It's in the show notes. You can learn more and you can join the coffee club today. You deserve it. Well, welcome back, everyone. We are so glad that you are joining us today. We are here with Berry McWhorter, and we're real excited to hear about some of the things that he's been doing and learning about in music ed. So, Berry, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Yes, thank you very much for having me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Could you go ahead and just, to get started, introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your background and current role in music education?
Sure, no problem. I'll kind of start currently and work my way backwards. I started teaching a little bit later in life. I finished a bachelor's degree and a master's degree back to back, both in music education. And my first year of teaching was when I was 30. And so I started teaching in 2017, mostly in the San Antonio area here in Texas. And since last year, I've actually kind of switched to being more of a full-time private music teacher through Music and Arts. Although I do still teach part-time in Bernie ISD, which is a community just outside of San Antonio. Prior to me finishing my degrees in music ed, I played professionally in a military band in the Parris Island Marine Band in Parris Island, South Carolina. So former Marine, and then after I got out, started going back to school. The military and the VA helped pay for 2 degrees in music ed, and I started teaching when a little bit later in life when I was 30 in 2017, and been doing that ever since.
Yeah, that's awesome. It sounds like you have had a variety of experiences, which is always
Indeed.
really nice. And I can imagine that your performance experience has also impacted how you teach too.
Absolutely.
Right.
Um, So should we jump right into kind of this
yeah.
Japanese music ed thing?
So so apparently you did this pretty cool master's project and learned a lot of things, right?
Yeah, no, it was great. So to give some context, I'll tell a little bit of a story, and it's all very relevant. It all ties in together. So I finished my bachelor's degree in 2015. So I started some of my senior level practicum in 2014, and at the time, he's still there, as a gentleman at the University of Georgia named Brian Wozlowski. And one of our first classes with him when I was at UGA, he just played some audio for us, and the audio was fantastic. It could have easily have been the Dallas Winds. It could have been the Marine Band. It was fantastic, and so he just played this little bit of audio for us, and he was kind of like, anybody want to take a guess at who's playing? And I was being a little smart, and I was kind of like, yeah, it's probably some Japanese middle school. And he was like, what, say that again? And I was like, it's probably a Japanese middle school. And he was like, actually, yes, you're 100% correct. And then he played the video for us, and it was these 13, 14-year-old Japanese kids just absolutely tearing it up at the All Japan Band Competition, which I'll be able to talk a little bit about that. And I was just completely captivated. I was like, I want to do that. Whatever it is that they're doing, I want to figure that out, because that's amazing. And so what Dr. Wozlowski did is he actually showed me some of the resources that he had. Most of it comes from this company in Florida called Bravo Music. And Bravo is an American subsidiary of this company called Brain Music in Hiroshima, Japan. And so Brain Music puts out a lot of education resources, mostly kind of geared towards bands. But they do have a little bit of orchestra, a little bit of elementary music. But it's a big Japanese music education company, and the American subsidiary is Bravo Music in Florida. And so Dr. Wozlowski shared a bunch of the DVDs that he had with me at the time. I went ahead and bought some of them myself and tried to absorb as much of this material as I could, because I was completely fascinated by it. And then when I started my master's degree in 2015, graduated in 2017. When I started my master's degree in 2015, I found out kind of early on that we were going to be able to choose a capstone project of a subject of our own choosing. And I was like, okay, well, I think I want to keep going down this Japanese music rabbit hole. And so that's what I ended up doing. I interviewed several people. I actually got to interview the president of Bravo Music. His name is Mark Humphreys. Got to interview him. Got to interview Mary Ellen Cabot, who is now she kind of went to the admin side over at Texas State University, and now she's back over at the School of Music at Texas State University. Interviewed her. She had actually gone to Japan a few times to observe some things. And some other folks that were in and around Japanese music, mostly directly, having gone to Japan and visited some people, visited some groups and gotten to observe them directly. So I got to interview those guys. I pulled together as many English language resources as I possibly could dealing with the subject, whether it be band or general music, and kind of Japanese education writ large. And so I tried to pull as many of those resources together for a review of literature.
Sounds really interesting. And I love the way that professor kind of engaged you in that thing. Like, they shared one thing and there was that spark that you then just took. You went right down that rabbit hole and found all of I love that kind of thing in education when we see that happen.
Yeah, it was definitely inspiring. I owe Dr. Wozlowski a lot. I have to maybe once this gets published, I'll have to email him a link to this. So yeah, I can kind of talk about I can kind of give you guys a big overview of Japanese music education if you would like.
Yeah, absolutely.
Japan definitely modeled their education system after sort of a European model slash an American model of education. So they have a K-12 system just like we do. They typically organize their grades a little bit differently. In a lot of places in the United States, we do K-5 as elementary school. In Japan, on the vast majority of schools are K-6. That's what they consider elementary school, and then they have a traditional junior high, which would be grades 7, 8, and 9, and then high school would be 10, 11, 12. And of course, there's college groups and civic groups that participate in different musical things as well. The music education side of Japanese schools is compulsory up through the end of elementary school. In middle school and high school, a lot of schools do offer general music education, but it's not compulsory past middle school. But what's really interesting about the elementary education side of things is how comprehensive it tends to be. So a lot of my interviewees talked about how at the elementary level, kids are usually leaving sixth grade knowing how to read notes on a staff. They have some kind of a playing experience, whether it be with recorders or even melodicas. So like some real sort of basic piano stuff on a melodica. And even I wish I could remember what they're called, but those music note shaped toys.
Yes, I do know what you mean. But
I can't think of what they're called, but apparently there's even some places where they can do like little choirs and stuff with those things. Okay. Most people, I think, when they see me do this, they know what I'm talking about. Those things. So like I said before, in junior high and senior high, music education, general music education is offered, but it's not compulsory. So any of the kind of band, choir, orchestra, that's actually an after-school club. So it's a club activity in Japan. It's not part of the regular curriculum. It's not part of the regular school day. So any of again, if you go on YouTube and search for these groups, elementary level, elementary bands, choirs, orchestras, middle school band, choir, orchestra, high school band, choir, orchestra. Those are all after school clubs. And so there's a club sponsor who oftentimes will have some kind of a music ed background. Oftentimes the band or choir sponsor is the general music teacher, but they don't have to be. So sometimes the club sponsor is just a really, really accomplished amateur musician. One of my interviewees told a story about how one of the top Japanese bands, the conductor slash club sponsor for that group, was actually in his words, a world-class harmonica player. So these kids are meeting after school. The limits for how long they can meet after school are really not there. It's kind of depending on what the community and the families are willing to do. So some of these groups, especially the ones that perform at particularly high levels, they can be during kind of their busy season, they can be meeting after school for as long as about 3 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes they even come in on the weekends too. If it's a week or two out from a competition, they'll come in on Saturdays. And so there's really no limit as to how long these kids could potentially, like if they want to join the club, they kind of know what they're signing up for. So that's kind of what got me hooked. My background's in percussion. And what I do for music and arts is I'm kind of a jack of all trades. I teach strings, winds, brass, percussion. And so seeing these kids perform at a really high level is kind of I really enjoy talking about it, and it's a lot of fun for me to observe and to talk about.
Yeah. And I wonder, I'm thinking too, and then and as an educator, then you go into the classroom, like, how did this experience and learning about Japanese music education affect your teaching or your classroom?
Right. So the way these, a lot of these groups are organized, so usually there's just that one club sponsor. And so the club sponsor, particularly at the end of the school day, because their normal job is as a teacher, maybe it's music ed, maybe it's science, maybe it's math. From about 3:30 to 4:30, they're usually doing end of the day administrative stuff, grading, what have you. But the clubs are usually already meeting. And so that's kind of a significant point, because the next logical question is who's watching the kids? Um, and the answer is themselves. There is an extraordinarily large amount of time that is not unstructured but unsupervised. And so there is an incredible amount of responsibility that is placed on the students to really kind of run things. Now, of course, the club sponsor is there for sort of like the big picture choices and some of the individualized instruction, but that's only to a point. There are often times where the club sponsor will call a sectional, and will either kind of float from section to section, or just turn it over to student leaders. And so you have what is, if you're very familiar with Japanese anime, you've probably come across the phrases senpai and kohai. Senpai would be like the kids with seniority, and kohai would be the more junior members. So senpai are usually your older students, and they sort of by default of being an older student take on that leadership role. It could be something as innocuous as just setting a good example, or they could be a section leader, or they could be the band president or vice president. They could be very much involved in running the day-to-day activities of a particular section. So a section leader, if a club sponsor says to go and go do sectionals, then that particular section leader is running the sectionals. And that may include providing direct instruction to some more junior members. Oftentimes these band clubs will try to recruit from the general population of the school, especially at the beginning of the school year. There's usually a big drive to kind of recruit for all kinds of clubs. And so a lot of these kids are coming to these different musical organizations with no playing experience. And so the club sponsor will provide some direct instruction, but oftentimes it's peer-to-peer. They're the ones teaching kids how to buzz on a mouthpiece or play an oboe, or sing, or do a really nice pizzicato or what have you. So it's very much student-led in that sense. So that's really how all of this has kind of affected my teaching. And I'll talk a little bit more about that, about what we've kind of done at Bernie. I'm trying to think if there's anything relevant that I need to hit on as far as kind of the structure of these bands. When I say student led, it is a lot of times kids. Now, this is where in the United States we can't necessarily take what they're doing and apply it to ours, but a lot of times, especially according to my interviewee folks, kids are handling money. They're fundraising. That's I don't know of a single organization in the United States that would be like, yeah, that's fine. But in Japan, they like the kids are fundraising, they're handling money, they're recruiting, they're advertising for an upcoming show. Sometimes these public performances for certain bands, they can rent out a performing arts center and sell out the performing arts center, which is a big deal. Like in the United States, I think a lot of times we don't necessarily draw in the general population, the general public, into our performances. But in Japan, these performing arts groups can sell out performing arts centers, which is a big deal. And kids they're packing instruments, they're setting up the stage, They're setting up the rehearsal rooms. They're when I like all of the logistics. It's very, very much turned over to the kids in a lot of circumstances, and the club sponsor is there to supervise, make some artistic choices, run large ensemble rehearsals for sure. But the kids do just so much of the footwork for these ensembles. It's really extraordinary.
Yeah,
Um,
that's incredible. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
no, please go ahead.
So I'm just thinking about how, when I was a band director and many of the ensemble directors I talked to, there's this feeling that I have to be the expert in the room, and I am the expert, meaning the one expert in the room, and I have the students, and yeah, maybe they know some things too, but there's a lot of pressure to have that. And what you're saying is, yeah, the club sponsor still has a great deal of knowledge and also has a good amount of, I don't like the word control, but we'll say control, but yet really is turning things over to the kids. And from also what you're saying, it works. They're still performing at a high level.
It works really well for I think, in my assessment, for a few reasons. Now I should say that not every musical program across the entirety of Japan is just a monster ensemble. You're going to have that bell curve. So there's some lower achieving groups. There's some much higher achieving groups. But particularly for those higher achieving groups, I think it's the ownership, the student ownership. Like they want to see the group succeed, and so they're pouring a lot of their, if you'll pardon the cliche, blood, sweat, and tears into the organization in order to see it succeed. And what also that allows the organization to do is, some of these kids wind up with some really valuable specialized and institutional knowledge. So in the United States, more often than not, especially for our instrumental ensembles, band and orchestra, it's extraordinarily common for people to be in some kind of a setting where they're using a method. Like they're using an orchestra method or a band method. And anybody who's done any kind of instrumental music teaching out of a method knows that there's kind of some compromises made on it with certain instrumentation in order to get everybody moving at the same, doing the same thing at the same time. But with these, especially with these sectionals, when you start splitting kids off and have these section leaders running things, well, then we can use some method that's specifically written for violin or specifically written for oboe or what have you, rather than it being a method that rather than it being a band method. It's more like it's literature that's more specialized for that particular instrument. And so the responsibility for the club sponsor of knowing everything is a little bit lifted. And as a matter of fact, I remember a quote from one of my interviewees who was quoting another Japanese club sponsor who kind of incredulously was like, "You guys know how to play all the instruments?" Like they were like completely shocked. Like, it's like, and I don't know exactly what that individual was thinking, but I can imagine that it was probably something to the effect of like, just have the kids do it. Which again, that's almost unheard of in the United States. Having the kids do so much direct teaching.
I want to hear now about your classrooms.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Nice.
Because now I'm like really intrigued.
Okay, so I'm only part-time over at Bernie High School. But my fellow teachers at Bernie High School, we're all very, very much like-minded. And we have, especially within the past 6 months or so, all of us have really kind of coalesced around this idea. I think there are a lot of teachers, if you were to survey a lot of teachers, they would tell you that they feel that they want to create lifelong music learners. And if you were to get a convention hall full of music teacher, how many of you believe in creating lifelong music learners? Like everybody's hand would go up. So that's very common. We have it's not nothing, but hardly anybody would disagree with that. However, what we have tried to interrogate at our school is what kind of decisions are we making that actually reflect that kind of long-term investment in students. And so what particularly since it would be the last quarter, the last grading quarter. So since like March, we all of March up to the end of the year, what we did, it was kind of an experiment. We didn't know of anybody else who was trying to do this, although I'm sure there are. And if you've tried to do this with your own group, I would love to hear from you. We would love to hear from you. But we tried to do a student-led concert, and kind of to an extreme. We let the kids vote and pick the literature. We let the kids vote and pick their conductor for that particular tune. We had those conductors lead sectionals. We tried to step back as much as possible and float and observe and offer pointers and redirect in that sense as much as possible. So we really tried to have it be as student-led as we could possibly manage it. And really, like I said, just kind of stand back and observe and float and comment. We gave some very basic sort of conducting lessons, which we're gonna expand upon in this upcoming school year. Because after sort of doing the postmortem of the fall concert, if you will, that was one of the things that we were like, okay, we definitely need to have the kids. We need to train them to conduct a little bit better. So that's one thing that we can fix. But one of the things that we thought went really well is having each, whenever we would do small groups and sectionals, we would have this the student conductor for that particular piece only teach a certain number of measures, and it was a group of measures that they picked. Like we had them listen to a previous rehearsal, and we're kind of like, okay, what do you hear? And they're like, well, I really think from this point to this point needs some work. Okay, it's like, okay, that's your target for tomorrow. So when you float around to the different sections, you're going to teach that same spot to every single group. And then whenever we brought everybody back together for the large ensemble rehearsal, that was still the same chunk that we focused on. And that seemed to work really well, as opposed to kind of putting out fires, like just going from group to group and kind of being like, okay, let's start from the beginning and see how this goes. And then kind of putting out fires that way. It was much more targeted. That was a strategy that we kind of stumbled into, that we're like, okay, I think this works.
Yeah.
And then even up to the concert, kids were setting up the stage. They were emceeing. They were conducting everything. We tried to turn it over to the students as much as possible. And so I really think that, at least on my end, the Japanese music education side of things was a big influence, particularly with the student-led aspect of it. And that's how I've helped kind of contribute to some of the stuff that we've done at Bernie High School. And fingers crossed, we're about to finish a proposal for the Texas Music Educators Convention in February, where we were hoping to present on this exact thing. Much less Japanese music education focused and more student-led, performance focused. And we've even kicked around the idea, like our large group performance evaluation in Texas, it's called UIL, University Interscholastic, but it's large group performance evaluation. We've even considered, like, we're kind of like, is there anywhere that it says that students can't conduct at UIL? Which would be kind of renegade of us, I think. I couldn't, if you're a band director or choir, orchestra, any kind of UIL music ensemble that has gone to UIL and had students run the whole thing, I would love to hear from you. We would love to hear from you because that I to my knowledge, it's unheard of. So yeah, we're really trying to take this idea of lifelong music learners to a bit of a extreme is probably the wrong word. I think we're probably just taking it to its logical conclusion.
Yeah.
And just having kids do as much of the thing as possible, because whenever they leave us, they're going to be the ones choosing the music, and whether it be for a small ensemble, private solo, as part of a community ensemble somewhere, like they're going to be the ones having to go through all of these steps. So why not offer that kind of training now, rather than it be so top down?
Yeah.
There's so many things that I'm thinking about right now. I'm going to try to say one of them at a time and not just. So episode 49 that we recorded was with Ryan Diefendorfer, and he took a similar approach to what you're mentioning, but he did it looking through the lens of the Orpheus Ensemble. Are you familiar with them? Like they call themselves like a conductorless ensemble.
I'm almost positive I've listened to that podcast.
Oh, okay.
Maybe I've actually been going through the backlog of Pass the Baton, and so I've got like the last 10 and the first 10, and I'm trying to close the gap in the middle.
But it's just interesting that there's a lot of like similarities to what you're both talking about, you know, with the idea that the students really take charge. And what I loved about what you were saying, and Ryan, talks about this as well, it wasn't like you just said, okay, have at it, and went and sat in your office with your feet up, right? You're still involved. You are scaffolding that process. You are helping them. You're there to make sure that they're successful, but you're not to the point where holding their hand through every step. And I think that's really important to think about. And I also loved that you said, we made this change, and here's how we're thinking about looking at it for next time. And like this is, it's not a one and done. It's a very evolving process, I imagine, right?
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah. We're kind of hooked. This is, with the, there and kind of spitballing, like there's ways to incorporate this kind of student-led-ness. Well, okay, let me illustrate it like this. So, I was talking about Bravo Music being in Florida, and Dr. Wazlowski. So Dr. Wazlowski, before he completed his PhD, he was teaching at JP Taravella in Florida. And in a lot of places, as I'm sure you guys are aware, in a lot of places, it doesn't matter if your band is 300 or 30, there's usually just the one director. And so JP Taravella and one of my other interviewees, Luke, they were really kind of hooked on the Japanese way of doing things, kind of out of necessity, because there was maybe one other person there to help out, but obviously for like marching band and stuff like that, like there's like so many moving parts, you need help. And so why not recruit the kids and kind of make them subject matter experts in something, in some aspect of the marching band or something like that. So yeah, that's how Dr. Wazlowski kind of got hooked on it. Mark Humphreys was also a former band director at Taravella, and he got hooked on it for the same reason. So Florida in particular was kind of a hotbed for this sort of system, again, just out of necessity. And so even in places like Texas, where it's really common for large programs to have multiple music teachers on staff, there's no reason that we still can't turn a lot of the responsibility over to the kids.
We've had people say various things like that about the necessity element on this too. They're like, yeah, I started doing this out of necessity, and then I realized, oh, it's really good, and it really works, and it has made such a difference. So I guess, what have you noticed in the students since making some of these changes? How is it impacting the kids? Like, what kind of benefits do you see for them?
It's definitely all kind of anecdotally. We actually just kind of thinking about this now. What we need to do is an end of the year survey. And I don't think that we did one. But anecdotally, it was just kind of more, again, kind of using that word of ownership again, a stronger sense of ownership. Um, Kids really enjoyed being part of the process. I didn't hear, if they were saying it, they were saying it to themselves, and it was not an out loud thought. But I didn't hear any complaints about the process and about having to choose music or having students conduct or lead the rehearsals or the sectionals. I didn't hear anybody say anything, but this is stupid. Why are we doing this? None of it. And so the buy-in, I guess, has been probably the biggest payoff thus far. But we're still, to kind of keep using the data collection metaphors, we're still early in the data collection process, and we want to keep doing more of this to kind of see where it goes.
Yeah. But I think while I want to ask you a question while you're fresh in the process. I think something we don't maybe talk about a lot or enough, Theresa, but it gets brought up to us, is like the giving, again, the control, giving up the control or whatever in your classroom. Like, I guess, could you share with the listeners, like, what you felt like as trying this as a teacher? And, like, was it, I don't know if scary is not the word, but was it hard for you? What were your worries or, that kind of stuff?
So kind of speaking for my other colleagues as well, because we were constantly talking to each other and evaluating the process in real time. So kind of summarizing all of our thoughts. The biggest trepidation initially was just the fear that this could go sideways. Mm-hmm. And so you're absolutely right that we weren't just kicking our feet up and turning the kids loose and just kind of being like, good luck. We definitely tried to put things in place to make the likelihood of success much higher. Mm-hmm. And so that's probably if I had to offer any advice to anybody who wants to try this, is that you're dealing in probability statements. And so there's no structure that's going to give you 100% success. Mm-hmm. But you can definitely try to tip it in your favor. But you also don't want to tip it in your favor so much that you wind up hand-holding your kids. Dr. Duke at UT Austin has a really, really brilliant analogy that he likes to use, and he likes to compare education writ large, not just music education, but education writ large to T-ball, and how when you're learning how to play baseball and it's on a tee, it's a stable target. So mm-hmm. you're teaching the kids how to have a really level, perfect swing. But then after a little while, they get pretty good at that, and then you move up to coach pitch, and so now it's a moving target, but it's a predictable moving target. And so there's just that little element of error. The process of error making is vital to learning. Mm-hmm. And so you don't want anything to be error free, but you want it to be structured in such a way that when the kids do make an error, it's not catastrophic. Mm-hmm. So the baseball is a great analogy with, coach pitch is a little bit, it's a moving target, but it's predictable. And then finally you move up to actual pitch. And by then you've swung at a ball quite a few times to where
right.
the likelihood of you figuring it out after a little while is much higher. Mm-hmm. So it's the same thing with this process. Like there was trepidation in kind of turning them loose. But very quickly we were kind of like, yeah, okay, this is fine. And we were there to, if some kid was like, I don't know what to do next, it's like, okay, no problem, try this. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, it was I think there's also an element of safety involved with that, like just kind of feeling safe to make mistakes. Mm-hmm. Particularly for the kids that were having to lead the rehearsal. It's like, we were kind of like, now you know what we feel like it's stressful for you, it's stressful for us. Like we're not going to always be up here and say the same thing, say the perfect thing every single time. So like it's creating a safe environment and creating an environment where success was likely, but we didn't handhold them through the process.
Yeah.
And I imagine there's also that sense of trust that, the students also trusted that you weren't there to watch them fail, right? You
Right.
had built those relationships, you had built all of that community within the ensemble that could happen. Am I right in thinking?
Yeah. I kind of think of it again, going back to safety a little bit, like nobody's there to laugh at them. We're certainly not there to laugh at them. If a student were to laugh at them, we would 100% shut that down. Like the trust, I don't know if there's much of a distinction between trust and safety. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so important.
I think something too that teachers, will be, I don't know if they're surprised or not, but like the fact that like sometimes when you just say that to the kids too, like we're going to try something different today, not really sure how this is going to go. I get a lot of response from kids like, that's okay, Mrs. Finch, that sounds great, let's try it. Right. Like, I mean, if you've got that environment, like everybody's going to help each other. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Kids are there to help each other. The kids are there to offer constructive feedback. The adults are there to offer constructive feedback.
Yeah.
I can definitely see this kind of collaboration being a long-term thing that we're all of us at Bernie High School are enjoying immensely.
Nice. And I just think it's good to just say that like it's okay to have, or we all are going to have those kind of moments of like, oh, we're going to do this, but like I heard you say, you just work through it, like and it was great that you had someone to work with too, just to kind of talk through what are we going to do differently, what are we going to keep, but
oh yeah, having multiple very smart humans to collaborate with is a blessing for sure. Like I said, there's lots of places that it's just the one person. I've been the only music person in a building before, and having another adult to spitball things off of is extraordinarily helppful and reassuring to a large degree. Especially the whole let's this went well, let's do more of that. So
well, we'll just put a plug out there. You can also find those connections like virtually, right? Even if you don't find the person in your building. I mean, that's how Kathryn and I met. We were both like, I want to try crazy things in my music room. Me too.
and I think that's part of the reason of having podcasts. I've heard music ed podcasts where they, this is sort of a professional development.
Absolutely.
So yeah, this is a great resource as well.
And now you're talking about my potential dissertation topic, but that's a whole nother podcast.
Nice. Well, if you need a citation or a quote for your dissertation, I'd be happy to provide.
Excellent. Thank you.
Real quick before we kind of start wrapping things up, I feel like I would be remiss. I know you maybe wanted me to mention a little bit about some resources.
Yeah, if you have any.
So Bravo Music Inc. The website has changed, the URL has changed, but I believe it's bravomusicinc.com. But if you just Google that, one of the first things that should come up is Brain Music of Japan. So if it's Bravo Music and Brain Music of Japan, you're in the right place. Other resources that are going to be harder to find, particularly just kind of being sort of band centric. There is the NEMU band method, which is actually in Japanese, but there was an English translation. Ooh, can't really see that too well. That's the back of the camera. That's why. The JBC band method. However, so this is kind of the English translation of the NEMU band method. It's both were published by the Japan Band Committee. Although the JBC band method has been harder to find, I tried to see if I have the conductor's book, and I tried to see if I could find all of the individual parts. And I'm slightly terrified that they've put it out of print, but I don't know for sure. But those are two resources. If you happen to find any used copies anywhere, those are other two really great resources, specifically dealing with Japanese band. And then the music ed, especially the general music kind of stuff. I'm happy to provide people with what I learned about the general ed side of things. And I'm definitely happy to provide people with my capstone project paper as well.
Well, that's wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Sure.
So yeah, as we start to kind of wrap up, so when we were writing Pass the Baton, the book, one of the things that we included every section of the chapter was things to try tomorrow, a quick actionable idea. And we found that they were really well received. So we want to ask you, if you had a suggestion, what could listeners try tomorrow or, Monday in their classroom, whatever, what might you offer?
Right. So I think probably the easiest, the quickest thing to do would be to try some version of a student-led sectional. And yeah, I think that would be it. That's fairly low stakes. And something to where even if you did it in class, if you have the space to kind of split up into some different practice rooms, a hallway, the corner of your room, what have you, and have the kids have a leader, either a section leader or some kind of a student designated leader, try to provide feedback. I think if we're going to try to, again, going back to the lifelong music learner thing, the one of the best and biggest way, one of the most important ways that we can help create lifelong music learners is to help them generate their own feedback. And so giving them opportunities to provide feedback either to themselves or to others, I think is probably the quickest thing that you can do. I don't know if it's necessarily easy, because again, you kind of have to relinquish some control. But that would probably be the biggest, the quickest thing to do.
That's great. Yeah. And that it's very actionable, something we can just try. Love it.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for meeting with us and talking to us about this. This was really fascinating. Is there, how could people connect with you if they want to learn more about your work?
Sure. So my name is spelt a little funny, but it's Berry McWhorter, BERRY McWhorter, MCWHORTER, at BernieISD.net. And Bernie is also spelt a little weird. It's BOERNE. So it kind of looks like Beauharney. It's a German town.
Okay.
It's a German town in the Texas Hill Country. So yeah, Berry.McWhorter at BernieISD.net. I'm also on Facebook and Instagram if anybody wants to send me a message on the various messenger apps through Facebook or Instagram. Because my name is kind of a unique spelling, it should be relatively easy to find. And so yeah, either one of those methods is great.
Good.
Thank you. We'll put some links in show notes and all of that stuff as well.
Very well.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again. This was wonderful. As you were talking, as I said before, there were so many things that I was thinking about. I was like just nodding my head. Yes, like this is exactly what we're hoping people can try to do, because it's so valuable for the students, and I think it just takes the music making to the next level. Exactly.
And I don't really remember how I came across Pass the Baton. It could have very easily have been just like a recommended thing on the Apple Podcast app or something like that. But within a couple of episodes, I don't even remember where I started, but within a couple of episodes, I was like, yeah, this is we're all kind of thinking the same thing.
Yep.
So
Yeah, that's awesome.
This is great. Well, again, thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you very much for having me on. I love talking about this, and this is a lot of fun. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. If you have found value in our conversation, please hit that like button, subscribe to our podcast, and leave a review. Your feedback means the world to us and helps us grow our community of passionate music educators.